With most businesses, there is only 1 out of 20. That's horrific odds. 1 out of 20 businesses succeed. I know if I create 3 businesses, one's going to be a multi-million-dollar business, one's going to fail, one's going to be mediocre. So it's just a matter of getting the stupid ideas or the ones that are not going to work out of your system quickly and early. As a matter of fact, I had more failures than I did successes. The actual stats, I've had 19 that failed. 19 failed, but 17 did become multi-million-dollar businesses that were started with $5,000 to $10,000 of capital. If you take nothing else out of this little conversation, 1 out of 20 businesses succeed. And the reason for that is
when you start to talk about the many businesses that you've created, I think it's 51 businesses across 14 countries that are all multi-million-dollar businesses, and you've started them with $10,000 as a framework. You know, this is I guess the zigzag principle. Walk us through that, because a lot of people are listening and they might have their dream or their goal just sitting on the tip of their tongue and they want to do it, but they haven't taken the step. And you've done this so many times. It's such an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, it's a content that I'm actually really proud of and a great starting point. But I have to tell you, Scott, a lot of that was just driven like internal rocket fuel. And I always like to point out, not all 51 of us succeeded. As a matter of fact, I had more failures than I did successes. The actual stats, I've had 19 that failed. 19 failed, but 17 did become multi-million-dollar businesses that were started with $5,000 to $10,000 of capital. And I think the point that I really want to make there is it's actually okay to fail. As a matter of fact, it's good to fail. You just want to fail quickly and efficiently. Fail efficiently. And so part of the context of zigzag principle, there's 10 fundamental things. And I'll just right up front say it was one of the precipice books of the lean startup movement, but it wasn't the most intelligent. And that was a lot of the problems. I mean, some of these books, it's just like, oh my gosh, it's like takes 3 PhDs and impossible to implement. So I think it's a very tactical, pragmatic approach that if you want me to, I can just kind of quickly, you want me to review the key tenets of it?
I think that's a good starting point. I think it'll give us a framework for the conversation, because a lot of the things that you do in business, you also do in life, and help us with realignment and resetting and all the things that we're doing. So I love to start here.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, it's about 12, 13 years old. I kind of went back and rewrote it, updated it last year, and it was really fun because a lot of the principles held stronger than ever. And there was a couple of places I discovered I'd injected a little bit too much ego, and the places I was a little weak, I juiced it up a little bit. But I think in general, by the way, I'm an engineer, background of an engineer, but really heart-centered. So I always, kind of simplify things and put things in framework from a heart-centered, and that's what zigzag principle did. So the first 3 steps of zigzagging really is just breaking down angles of declination. Most people, when they start a business, they try climbing right straight up Mount Everest. By the way, that's where the inspiration came as I was climbing in the Himalayas. And so I pulled down angles of declination. Zig number 1 should always be drive to profitability. Even if it's something you don't want to do, if it takes you in the general direction of profitability, get to profitability first and quickly. Then number 2, once you figure it out, you kind of butcher, baker, patty cake maker in that first mode. Phase number 2 is then you add resources and process. You figure out what worked, what did not work, and what you extract, so you make it a little bit more efficient and duplicatable. Then and only then at that point, you add that final zig, zag, zig. You add the scale element. The challenge with most businesses, there is only 1 out of 20. That's horrific odds. 1 out of 20 businesses succeed. And the reason for that is they go directly for scale element. And it's just too steep of an inclination angle. And the result is most of the time just complete, utter, messy loss. And so I believe in really quick little failures. Getting to that profitability is the first sequence of zigzag principle. And then I won't belabor all the rest, but then I strongly believe also in guardrailing, putting guardrails, planting hidden trades, and making sure you clearly define so you never risk what you're not willing to lose. People always say, Rich, gosh, you've done pretty well. Why do you only do $5,000 or $10,000 still? It's because I always constrain, number 1, with capital, number 2, with time, how much duration of time, and the most important is the relationship capital. I don't expose every key relationship to every harebrained idea I have. So always guardrail anything you're doing. If you take nothing else out of this little conversation, please put guardrails in your life, because it really becomes an at-bat game, Scott. It really does. It's like, I know if I create three businesses, one's going to be a multi-million-dollar business, one's going to fail, one's going to be mediocre. So it's just a matter of getting the stupid ideas or the ones that are not going to work out of your system quickly and early, so you can just kind of keep swinging at that ball until you get a ball on wood.
I think it's always funny to me how movement and action create opportunity. And so as you're moving towards something, your first idea, you're driving towards profit, you might find another avenue that's 10x more profitable that you didn't even know existed through those small little fractures or failures within the systems.
Yeah, that's such a good point, and inevitably that's what happens. I mean, your first idea, by the time you go to scale, very, very, very seldom does that actually end up work. And then, another lean startup book that talks a lot about pivoting. I won't name what it is, but it's pivot, pivot, pivot. But you could pivot yourself right into Hades,
Right.
So I really think you got a guardrail. I think the concept of guardrail is a better idea, because once you get to that profitability, in the process of going through it, I'm a huge believer in fire, 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 aim, and then see where the rabbits jump. It's like, oh, there's one. Oh, nothing there. Let's go shoot somewhere else. Not that I'm hunting rabbits anymore, but the concept holds. The concept of fire, fire, aim. When all is said and done, more is usually said than done. And most people love to sit around and intellectually just elaborate on their pro forma model and their business plan. And what I've discovered, all that intellectual nonsense, by the time they've finished talking about it, I will have tried three things out and had something working and said, no, that was stupid. So I really believe in what you just said, is motion always generates opportunity.
Yeah, it's been something that I think has always grounded me in just being ready to move, being ready to try, and not afraid to fail. You
Yeah.
still feel it. You still feel that you don't. Nobody wants to fail, but at the closer you get to success, the more you're failing just a little bit more. And it's one of those things that it's no different than anything you try, whether you're practicing a sport or any of the things that people are trying to accomplish. It requires that repetition, that continuous movement, and you do just find these Rembrandts in the attic, if you will, where you're like, wow, that's the idea, that's the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really a good point. I do think we have to use wisdom, particularly of those who went before, and following models really helpful. My hit ratio would have been far, far better if I had understood later in my life what I was doing, and a lot of my failures consumed really early. I know we don't have time, we won't go into it. You've got some other important content to get to, but I think one of the areas that's really picked up a lot of steam is I have these four little models. Where do you fish? Getting you strong into felt need, tight constrained markets, a little model. I always use Michael E. Porter's 5 forces model to quickly identify how much transactional opportunity there is. So really quickly you can determine high probability of profitability in the business. And then I always use as my final screening the value decision matrix, a tool that I developed. So one of the really powerful things of Zigzag Principle is these quick little tools that in like literally 3-4 hours you can run through that will give you pretty context. Is this a good idea or a really stupid idea? And one other thing I'll say there, and then I'll let this one rest, is it's really important not to do the first idea you come up with. I've gotten to a practice of coming up with 50 ideas, 50 ideas before I'll begin one. And then I run all 50 through my tools to vet out the highest probability opportunity.
Now, are you taking these ideas ever and plopping them into any of the AI models and evaluating different ways to think or leveraging AI to help you in some capacity?
You know what? I have not. I'm actually half tempted. I don't operate anymore. I vowed I would not operate anymore, but it's so tempting when we have these beautiful transitions like we're going through. And we're going to see a world of just dramatic change, and we're going to have a lot of have and have nots based on these tools. So it's really intriguing to do that. And I'm half tempted to just go riff one more operation out just for good old time fun's sake to show it can be done. These tools do not use it. As a matter of fact, I actually think there's a lot of wisdom in not using it when it's critical thinking. I think that the AI models are amazing for reduction and efficiency. I don't think they're very good yet for critical thinking.
Yeah, you know what I like to use it for? I like to brainstorm with it. So you know how you get energy from other people in the room? You know, sometimes if I'm sitting in a room and we're just riffing, almost like a band where you get in, one's playing the guitar, someone's playing the drums, and and just kind of going back and forth, and all of a sudden you start to make music. What I find interesting about AI is the ability to take 50 ideas and just brainstorm and
Yeah,
ask questions and get curious and just keep these little markers that you can go back to when something comes. I've been in a room where someone says something I don't understand, and I just go in and I open it and I say, define this, and then I get curious about it. I put it to the side and I go back to it later to learn maybe what I was missing or why I didn't understand it, and then sometimes it starts to build out a model of something that I hadn't even thought of, and
yeah,
so
I
it's
love that.
brainstorming to me. That's really cool.
What I love is when I have a raw thought, like an inspiration, call it God, heaven, divine source, I don't care what you call it. But when something dumps into you and you think, oh my gosh, and that comes, then so quickly you're able to just quickly go do the research and capture the data. I have a little niece that came down and visited me, and her husband got themselves in a pretty good financial sticky wicket here. And he's a dentist over in New Zealand, and they wanted to talk about, okay, how do we undig this? And so I instantly took the idea, threw it in the tool, and back it popped the top 3 or 4 countries with all of the dynamics and opportunities, then created a whole next set of thread in different genres. I think that that's what you're
A
referring
hundred
to,
percent.
is it just rips out. I like to view it as it has like 3 PhD the non-egocentric, very pleasant research assistants on hand for me at any moment, which would take them 40 hours. It takes 2 minutes. So that's how I use AI. And it's such a fun thing. And a lot of ways, man, if I'd had that tool, my hit ratio would have been so much higher.
Yeah. The things you can vet ahead of time, and you can never vet anything until you actually apply it, but just
Yeah.
the knowledge of being able to think through it. I also will take the framework. We talked about mutual friends that we have, like Joe Polish or Dan Sullivan, and you can actually ask it to be Dan Sullivan and walk through some of his models and take your idea and function it through, because all this stuff is completely out there in the open on PDFs and in the internet. And so it's super interesting to be able to dive into some of the people that you admire in business and have them think about how to draw a webinar up the right way or how to build something that you've never done. But again, you have to vet it and you have to go and apply it. But it's just a neat, it is from an idea person who's built a lot of businesses. It's very fun to think about
Yeah.
developing and building that way.
I really agree. I think that one danger it has, I think it's like holding a whip, and the result is the long end of the whip. And we've got to be really careful that we're not just running around whipping everything. I still think there's a lot of pragmatic approach and discipline that needs to be used. For example, one of the foundation, we're way off on zigzag, but that's good, I guess. The one thing that I really fundamentally believe is you've always got to separate your creative modes from your production modes. So I really encourage not to start analyzing your business ideas until you have at least 50 down. Otherwise, you start going into shutdown and framing mode too quickly. And in the idea creation mode, you got to stick in that. One of the dangers of AI is it's so quick and so efficient. You can have idea and you go all the way down the rabbit hole and end up, kind of locked down and framed down in that. So I still think there's real wisdom in turn off the darn phone, do the 3-hour walk, climb the top of the mountain, use just the inspiration you have to actually come with fundamental, and then jump in and use the tools.
That's great. Rich, you've talked a lot in your career about family, and one of the things that I've heard you talk about is the Legato family framework. And I just think we have a lot of listeners who they like our show because we talk about parenting, we talk about relationships, we talk about the struggles of building a family, but to build it and to build businesses together, which is something that you've also done. A lot of families that have found success also find struggle with returning back to the values that built the success. And
Yeah.
I think you have some framework around that that's just really, really fun to share.
Yeah, I really did. And I have to just right up front say, Scott, this is content and thought leadership that I never ever thought that I would share. I actually was called not to. And every time my colleagues tried to rip it out of me, I'd say, oh, no, I don't know if this model is going to work until my grandkids are raised. But right in the middle of COVID, as I saw just the complete disassemblance and the tearing of the fabric apart of our families and our core units, and recognizing where that came from, I just had a really profound prompting to just bring this forward. And it's ended up being a joyful thing, but also a little bit tender. So I tread a little bit lightly what I talk about here. But yeah, indeed, this is the model that some 30 some odd years ago, my wife and I implemented for our family. Could I tell kind of the story of how that
Yeah,
came
I'd
to
love
be? And
to.
then
I'd
I
love to.
assume you
Yeah,
want me
get into
to
the weeds.
model
Yeah.
through that. Okay.
No, let's get into the story because our listeners are story they're the people that like the good campfire story. We can get into the weeds, and if they really want to learn more, you have the framework, the books, and the materials out there that we'll lead them to.
Yeah, so it was a personal dilemma. My wife and I both grew up in very humble circumstances. My wife was the youngest child of 9 of a dairy farmer. And my parents also struggled quite a bit. And so as we got married, the most important thing was our family. As a matter of fact, I'll say without hesitation, the most vital role that I have played is that of being a father. The one that I value more than anything is that of being a grandfather. And so early in my career, I was given a pretty significant opportunity. I was named general manager of Mitsubishi Electric's PC division here in the US, making more money than my father and my father-in-law at the end of their career. And it terrified my wife and I. It terrified us so much that our brilliant plan was to move to a very poor neighborhood and never tell our children that we had any money. And so this went on for a couple of years. I had an associate that came to me at one point and says, Rich, I've seen you do some really smart things, a few stupid things, but this tops the list of the stupidest things I've ever seen done. Because what's going to happen if your kids don't figure this out? If they don't figure out, which they will figure it, but if they don't, what you've done is you've passed the problem on to your grandchildren, completely destroyed your grandchildren. It's like, oh my gosh, I didn't think about that. And so I went on this hardcore quest trying to find a framework or a system of how to navigate this problem. What I discovered is what all the financial planners were offering, what all the investment people was is family banks, family constitutions, trusts, wills, and all these sterile instruments that honestly was just a bunch of hogwash. It just wasn't solving the problem, it was actually complicating the problem. So at that point, I was pretty close with Stephen Covey and went and had a conversation with him. He's one of my primary life influence mentors and says, here's what I'm facing. He says, you're right. There's nothing. Now I can offer the family mission statement, start with that, which I did, but it sounds like something to build. So what I did is I went and looked at any institution indoors. Anything that survives long term always had these key elements. And then I framed a framework after that. The platform being values. In your business, the first thing you used to find what your values and what you stand for. The government, first thing you do, it doesn't matter whether you're in Brazil, Canada, or US, they frame a constitution and they put their values. But we as families, we don't do that. We lost the art of that in the Industrial Revolution. So the first platform, most important, is getting coherency and agreement with your significant other on what your values are. Then equal important, if not more important, is what are you removing? In my wife and I's family, shame and guilt were used like peanut butter and jam to get any behavior you wanted. And we determined we are not passing guilt, we are not passing shame, and we are not passing scarcity. So we very deliberately put that in the trash can. Then, once we had the platform of values, the Legato framework calls out these 4 elements. The first is symbols. You have a logo for your podcast. We have the flag of the United States. We have pick your famous sports team. They have a color. But I bet anything, most of you listening to this don't know what your kids' colors are. They don't have a spirit animal, and likely you don't have a family logo or symbol. Well, we did. And this amazing thing happens when we identify. And by the way, if you're not doing this, guess who you're competing with? The Bloods, the Crips, and a professional basketball team whose values likely do not align with your family. But it's the first thing. We need this on such a deep-rooted human level. It's kind of like air and water to us. So creating a family symbol became the first thing that clearly identified. You can see there behind with my wife's in the center, surrounded, protected. I hold the space for her to fully manifest. And then each of my sons, we never turn our back on each other. We're always pointed inward. And then when my sons get married, they light up the little dot playing that role. And my favorite is the little grandkids that all focus in. You know, the first thing my grandkids do when they come is they always run, get a treat, and give a hug. But the second thing is they'll go to the family logo and they'll say, Everly, Everly. Oh, Grandpa, Samuel. They know where they fit, and it really matters because they're able to be seen. The ultimate human need is to be seen. So symbols. The second is doctrine. In the absence of really good clarifying doctrine of how you behave in the tribe, rooted on the values, you got a whole bunch of stupid rules. You show me a family or an organization with a bunch of rules, and I'll show you a broken culture. You do not need a ton of rules if you understand the fundamental tenets of the doctrine. So I ask you, do you have a family mantra? Do you have a family slogan? Do you have a family song? Do you have a family mission statement or a family framework? Do you have these guiding documents that all kind of returns you to basis? I could go a lot deeper there. In the interest of time, I'll just jump quickly. So the third is traditions. The cadences of tradition we have really, really matter. The short-term traditions and then also the long-term traditions. Most families have traditions like Thanksgiving, show up, watch the football game, everybody get drunk, brawl, repeat, rewind, do the following year. That's not constructive. So we've got to very, very deliberately root our traditions in our family values. So traditions is a key one. And then the one that I think really captivated, I really wanted to super glue this model, and it's the lost arts of rites of passage. So this is something that the indigenous cultures did so amazing. And we have the opportunity to even pour more rocket fuel on it. And so in our family, we put 8 is critical. It's when the pineal gland opens, enlightenment starts happening, self-discovery and self-governance. 12 is the age of puberty, where deciding course. 14 is the age where most kids really decide around that age, what am I going to be? Am I going to go forward? I'm going to be a scoundrel. And then 16 is the age of kind of career or interest setting. And then at 18, every son must kill his father, and every daughter must cut the e-drum string for their mother, or they end up codependent and dysfunctional. So in our family, we put some pretty kind of shocking, to the point people really don't believe we did it, which is great, rites of passage in place. It ended up being a total complete hoot, a complete blast, and just really deeply bonded us together as a family. The result now is I call my sons more for advice than they call me. My big son, my big 220-pound raw muscle, new improved version of me, came up to me last night, kisses me on the forehead, picks me up and squeezes me, shakes me around like a rag dog. And that's the result of me not meddling and interfering with his life and running him through these stages of passage. Once you have those 4 levels, again, values, throw away, symbols, traditions, doctrine, rites of passage, then you have the stability to carry the weight, and you need the family trust and the family banking and all of the instruments because you know what you're doing. Without that, if you're building a will and trust and haven't thought what your rooted values are, I mean, what are you aiming at? It's just completely ridiculous to think you're ever going to get there. So that's kind of the framework, Scott. And I know I went to that really quickly, but that's
great.
kind of what we did.
What were the most audacious things that stood out that you say people scoff at or are shocked at? What was the most
Well,
shocking?
when my sons turned 12, I took them for 3 weeks, each of them, me and them alone, to a third world country. The first week we would play like no tomorrow. We would go ride elephants or go see the Taj Mahal, or my son Tim wanted to go to the Pokemon Center of the world and have a deep week of exploring. Then the second week we would end up typically in Kathmandu, Nepal, holding the little lost girls, the little girls that had been rescued from the dowry of sexual slavery or even killed and their organs harvested, and touch humanity. We called this the non-entitlement and Christiansen men. On the way home, we had talked, what does a Christiansen man do and behave? Now, this is my values, so no one please judge. I've got a lot of criticism on this, but it's my values. We get to decide it. We protect. We provide. We provide safe space for women and children, and we fix a lot of shit. That's what Christiansen men do. And so at that point, my 12-year-old sons, they see me busting my gut and they say, providing dad, providing dad. They stand up for a bully, even though they're the kid getting bullied, because we provide safe space for women and children. They knew how to be a Christiansen man. Zero entitlement, never had one problem with cell phone because I put the effort in on the front end to really provide this bonding experience for my sons. Now, people always ask, I got 5 sons and then a little adopted Sherpa girl, but they ask, what would you have done if you had girls? What would have been my wife? My wife would have taken them. When they're 14, each of my sons and my wife, so we take them up a major world mountain peak. 3 of them stared up the throat of Mount Everest, equivalent of Camp 2, looking off Kalapatar, bawling themselves to the top. And if you haven't been to altitude, there's no exquisite pain like the beautiful pain above 17, 18,000 feet. So they would bawl themselves to the top of the mountain, growl looking up the throat of Everest, and come down men, because they have the power internally to do hard things, the private victories, not the public victories. So that was obnoxious one. Then the one that people, it's really fun. I had one of these videos that I guess went a little viral, and had a troll kind of come running in and says, I'm the youngest son of Richard Christiansen. He's such an evil man. And my youngest son, Jim, says, oh, really? And then he ended up getting a lot more attention than he did. But this one, actually, indeed, we did is when my sons turned 16. I'm a hardcore entrepreneur. So they were always building businesses, but I'd shake their hand and they would agree with me. They would not ask for anything else. As a matter of fact, they agreed to pay for their own college. They agreed to pay for their own mission. They agreed to pay for their own car when they got back. And they also agreed to pay for all our family vacations. And they did. As a matter of fact, each of my sons created $1 million businesses when they were still high school. And I put the caveat on that my 2 youngest had already built so many that they said, no, Dad. Tim wanted to write a book, so he became a best-selling author with me. Even if your toes turn purple, raising powerful teenagers who are confident and stand out. And then my youngest son, Alex, wanted to do a studio. So remarkable what they did. But then when they turn 18, they shut the business down, give all the excess money back to the charity of their choice, typically the orphanage or one of the ones they did their 12-year-old. And then they go off and they serve humanity for a couple of years. So those critical rights of, and those are ours. I could tell you others that I like even better that I've worked with. But you tell me, I mean, you go through that as a kid. Do you think I'm laying awake at night worrying how my grandkids are being raised?
No, but I think what you've done is really empowering, and it's also something that I think we lack so much of. The more our culture leans into the coddling and the helicopter parents and where I talked to a young man today and he said, in the finance industry, I've noticed that there's so many older people and there's not a lot of young people willing to take a chance. And he goes, I said, well, why do you think that is? And he says, well, I just think there's a lot of risk, and we're carrying a lot more debt, and we're doing. And it was all good points, but I said, yes, but a big difference is generational leadership. From generation to generation, I can tell you that we care so much more today than we ever did. What my sons have experienced, I was one of the first generations that I ever saw of men that were changing diapers and doing the things that, this wasn't something that was expected.
Yeah.
And then we woke up one day and it was like, it's mandatory. And so, you have this generation that has these unique differences. What you're doing is you're shaping the most important parts of becoming a man or a woman. You're laying them out, or human in general, and you're laying out what's important to you, and then you're all aligning together under a common good. And you're showing all of your children that they all belong, they all have worth, and they all can change the world in some capacity. I think it's powerful.
Well, it's the basic human needs. It's the institutional diagram that really, it's the only thing that really does work, whether it's the Bloods, the Crips, a gang, or a religion. Or you do it in the family. And tragically, a lot of these institutional safeguards, namely community, is just being fabric tore apart, not alone family,
Right.
because we used to have these safety nets to catch it when something fell, and they're just epically failing it. This is the very reason why I felt so prompted to come out with this Legato family framework. And I'll just qualify, I don't have all the answers. This is my framework. This is a framework that worked really well for our family. But you know what? In light of not having a framework, it's better to do something. If you want to go create your own, man, I'd love to hear what you do and how it works out. The advantage here is we implemented this for 30 years. And it's amazing because all the neighborhood kids wanted to jump in and be part of it. And it's just like raw meat to a hungry lion how badly we want this. Is the symbology of belonging, the doctrine of understanding where the guardrails are, the cadence and the comfort of tradition. We have this family legacy cabin, and I was shocked at this one. But at one point, "The Lord's been good to me" was sung off the balcony at sunset. "The Lord's been good to me, and so I thank the Lord." I won't go through the whole thing because I don't want all your listeners to drop off. But that was sung. And then my sons took it and adopted it. And now they literally wrote it into the bylaws of the cabin. If you do not sing that and you're our cabin, my teenage sons would have thrown you out of the cabin and made you sleep in the snowbank. So that tradition, that tradition is so vital. And then these rites of passage deeply bond it. And you look at anything that endures, whether it's a religion or a sports team, every one of those elements hold true. So I'd invite you to be deliberate. Just be deliberate. So many people have said, "Oh my gosh, it's too expensive, too hard." It's, well, hard, easy, easy, hard. It's like I did, those couple of 3 weeks with my kids, but then it just became this joy fest. My son's teenage years, oh my gosh, my wife went into total mourning when our teenagers were gone because they were so fun. And they didn't give us the back flack and the brain damage and the use on the phone. They were just like, man, they were better than we were. And so I think just a little bit of deliberate behavior can go a long, long ways. I just want to make one other comment. So many people come to me and say, "Oh, I kind of blew it. I'm past that age. What do I do?" And my comment is, it's never too late. I mean, we're reforming families that are the youngest kids 40, 50, 60, 50 years old. And just by putting it in place, it always provides stability. And I'll just give you advice of, if you're trying to reconnect with the child or anyone for that matter, let me give you 3 quick pieces of advice. Number 1 is take an interest in what they're doing. We always try shoving down everyone's throat what we're doing. If your son's listening to some crazy music, go listen to it and ask them what it's about and ask them to explain to it. And that will open them up. That's number 1. Number 2, say nice things about them behind their back. I challenge you to say nice things behind their back and watch the magic that happens. And then the third is honor them when they do something good by cooking their favorite meal. Those 3 things, although it sounds so simple, oh my gosh, that's held more relationships that I've worked with than anything I can count.
That's great. Yeah, and I think you make a great point. Is that the beautiful thing about family is forgiveness is a big part of any relationship, And if you can forgive yourself for maybe not doing the things you wish you would have, and have that space and grace, they'll probably have the same level of forgiveness. All we are is the best version of what we've got, and we got to work on building the next level. And so it sounds like you've built a really great framework. And what I find really interesting is the correlation between building a great business and building a great family. When you apply the same level of systems and processes, you also have those guardrails and the things that you've mentioned that tend to help you, in a way, see that level of success. I have a follow-up question, and that is, have you done anything with the family compound? We see this taking on a new world now, where a lot of families, especially families that are growing together in success, are looking to kind of raise the families closer together. Have you seen any success with that? Do you guys all live in close proximity, or is everybody away, or what does that look like for you guys?
I'm aware of families actually. And I think there's, and so I'm going to go out here. I hope I don't get a bunch of smacking over this, but I think there's real danger when successful mom and dad bring all the kids up, drop out of college, don't make a contribution. Here, let's all live in the lap of luxury. I honestly think you're doing your kids a huge, huge disservice when you do not let them stand up and be their own man and their own woman. And so I can't say with authority I have a model of how to do a family compound. I have to find someone else for that one. In our situation, our family does live fairly close to each other. It's 15 or 20 minutes away. We very, very deliberately and consciously do not interfere with our children's decisions regarding their parenting. They get to create their own logos and their own models, and we always try best as we can to just support them what they're doing. And it's evoked, for the most part, and we're not perfect at it, but it's evoked a beautiful response that the grandkids deeply, they had some here last night, some the night before, and we typically see them once, maybe twice a week, but we don't put any hardcore structure around it. We want to make sure that they're able to live their lives, fully manifest who and what they are. I think back to that concept of I want my sons to be, they know that they're not going to get any of my wealth. And they would be offended if I did give them money. And by the way, wealth isn't money. Wealth is we are well, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically well. That's what we need to be giving is a platform of values and wellness, not a bunch of money. And so I think letting our grown kids explore what their true nature is and their capacity, and sometimes stumble through it when they ask for some support. Great, we're there, we'll support, but we're not going to, jump in a lawnmower or helicopter our adult kids. And you see so many doing that now. It just mortifies me to see, disempowering our adult children.
Well, I think you expressed, when you started to tell the story, you expressed a very real thing, and that is the guilt of feeling successful and then wanting them to come from what you did to get where you are. And you and your wife were almost trying to hide it in the beginning. And then by expressing a new way of delivering it, by making it very intentional, you did exactly what was needed. I think I didn't come from, a great level of financial success. And so growing up, watching some of my family's friends that had wealth or success in any way, sometimes their dynamic wasn't anywhere near as close as ours. And now we all had our own warts and our own challenges. But the point is that I remember, as I started to become more and more successful, these were definitely big challenges. What do I pay for? What do I not pay for? How do I influence them in the right way? How do I make sure that they know the value of a dollar? These are all really real things that parents are nervous about. And the more successful you become, the more challenging that can be. So a lot of people can resonate with that concept.
Yeah, well, and I think I want to just question the premise of successful also, I mean, and that partly comes back to, if we frame our love based on you've got to succeed at business and doing this, then we're going to end up with every one of my kids as entrepreneurs. That is not going to be the case. At least I hope it is not. My grandchildren, we get new perspective. I love my children. I love them to the very core, but there was an element of fixing them. Now with my grandchildren, oh my gosh, it's like they're perfect. I have one little grandson, and I'm not sure if he's going to grow up to be Adolf Hitler or Winston Churchill, but it's not going to be anywhere in between. And I'm actually kind of okay either way. This little boy only has two questions. Where am I not supposed to go, and how do I get there? I've got another little granddaughter that all she wants to do is dance and twirl, and I swear she, in a former life, was a fashion diva. And so it's like, you go be a fashion diva, you go be the school teacher, mom, you go be the engineer, do what you need to do
Right.
that fully expresses the gravity of your soul. And that's what we need to be teaching our children. And that's where we get sick. Very, very sick. Let's not kid ourselves. Our society has a lot of money, but we are sick. We are deathly ill sick right now because we don't have wealth. We do not have wealth. We do not have wellness, emotional wellness, physical wellness, spiritual wellness, and yes, fiscal responsibility wellness. That's how I've reframed and view that context now with my children and our grandchildren and people in general. Let's not just view it of my bank account's full, but never mind, I haven't slept in 5 days and I'm strung out on speed and I got psychosis. That's not defining it properly.
Yeah, the founding fathers, the quote that I always like is "We are soldiers so that our children can be teachers, so that their
Yeah.
children can be artists." And when you think about it, um, you just define the art generation where you get to see whatever it is that they want to be, and you thrive on that. I have two boys who one's a Division I soccer player, and the other is playing at an academy, and he's full-time, moved away at 14 to do this. They are when they play their sport, they're artists. I mean, that's that, but they're playing a sport while they're disciplined and going to school and learning all the other areas. And I love watching that because, I don't know that I had that choice. Even if I
Yeah.
had the talent they had, I didn't feel like I had that choice. And so by allowing them to pursue that, it's definitely a big win. And then they seem to find their own way. But I think there are definitely some things I could be more intentional about as a father, and my wife and I together, that helps to build the generational strength, because you're not just trying to build this generation, you're trying to build, a generational roadmap and towards that wealth that you define with the wellness and the connectivity and all the things that make them want to come back, not the things that just make them need your money.
I think that we got so many things right when we put together the Constitution in the United States. And this actually came from the Iroquois Nation. The Iroquois Nation is where much of the fundamental tenets came from, but two things were taken out. The first is no decision is made without 7-generation thinking. And that is looking where you're at, looking what's the wisdom of 3 generations back, and then what does this decision have 3 generations going forward. If we started framing what we were doing and the strategic things we were putting down based on that, we'd be making a lot different decisions than burning everything so hot. The second is did you know in the Iroquois Nation, the chiefs were actually selected by the females, the wise females, and you could not go to war if the females didn't approve it. And so we have Chief Phil Lane's a friend of mine, says, we've been flapping around for 200 years with the right wing. And now it's like we're trying to flap with the left wing. What good does it do to have the left wing flying? It's like we need both wings to fly. And so I think that this hot, over hot energy, whether it's, you hear, I hate the word use toxic masculinity, or, manipulative feminine, they're really two sides of the same coin. It's like men and women working and standing in their power as sovereign kings and sovereign queens. That's how you end up with healthy kids. That's how you end up with stable, really good grandchildren. And we're starving for this. We're just dying, starving for it right now. And tragically, a lot of just like the good man, or we're afraid to even stand up and just hold our heads because it gets lobbed off every 5 minutes. So it's really a delicate situation we found ourselves societal. And if we don't fix it, we've got models. There's only 2 choices. We either fix this and get some healing, or we're going to stop being a civilization.
Yeah, it's not untrue. Now you wrote Blindsided, and this was more of a deep dive and a personal journey for you. And for someone that wants to know a little bit more about you and your story, what are the things that really drove you to put that onto paper and to share all of the background and the foundation of what made you who you are, and just a little insight into writing that book.
Yeah, well, it was definitely the most complicated of anything that I've written. It took me like 5 years to write it. Hired a New York Times investigative reporter to make sure I got everything really right. I felt very compelled. I had to write this story and get it accurate. Who lives, who dies, who tells your story? Because this story was going to be told, and I wanted it told in truth and accuracy. When I was 54 years old, and I've lived just the most remarkable, amazing life, but had the biggest identity crisis you could ever imagine, based on the age of 54, discovering that my father was not my father. My father grew up in the Great Depression. At the age of 4 years old, both of his eyes were removed due to retinal blastoma, leaving him as a little blind boy. Keeping in mind it was the 30s, the only prospect was number one, to become a professional beggar, or number two, become institutionalized. Well, this little blind boy actually had an eidetic memory, which means he could hear a phone number or hear something recited and 30 years later recite it verbatim. My mother was a beauty queen, 15 years his junior, came out of a really traumatic family, just every kind of craziness you can imagine, and she wanted to marry a really good man. So I was the oldest son of John and Laurel Christiansen. That was my entire identity. My entire life was framed around being that honorable oldest son and attempting to in some way reach that milestone, which I never really could do, reach that level of brilliance and performance of my father. But nonetheless, I knew something wasn't quite off. At the age of 54, it came out through a very interesting DNA test. We'd always call my youngest brother the milkman's son because he was dark. He'd walk into a room. He was gorgeous. All the women would just, and where, as you can tell, I'm zippy, 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 and all my brothers are zippy, zippy. And he wasn't. He was dark and a little bit like just a little, a little like chillo
Suave.
mellow. Or,
He had that suave.
well, it turns out that he, 50% of a rare Jewish ancestry, which prompted us all to start taking DNA tests. And it turns out my brothers are not my brothers. So the only conclusion left is, oh, mom is skanking around, which my mom was like the most religious, moral woman you could ever imagine. So we're like, oh my gosh, what's going on here? So at that point, you go to your 92-year-old father and say, hey, Dad, mom was getting some on the side. We're not your sons. After a lot of debate, we decided to approach him. And indeed, his comment was, this is going to be the first order of business in the life hereafter. Yeah, that's right. My retinal blastoma was genetic. And so it turns out that I was one of the first donor conceived children that there was. A famous doctor from New York moved out and started doing this procedure, keeping in mind it's illegal. My father was the county attorney, so he would have had to put himself in prison. It was excommunicatable from the religion, which is even a bigger deal. So they told nobody. And I won't ruin the surprise for you, but probably the most complicated and delightful part of this thing, and incredibly complicated, is who my biological father ended up being. So I'm not going to ruin the book for you, but it was, if you had taken a 10,000-pound wrecking ball and whacked me in the front of the forehead, it would have been mild compared to what that ended up being. And so I had this beautiful opportunity to reconcile my identity, my faith, what had driven me to create all of these businesses, and completely reset it and face my fears, my deepest fears with reality, and just reframe how I viewed life. So that's the blindsided story.
What a great synopsis, and the cliffhanger makes everybody listening want to go pick it up. So, Rich, how do they find you? How does everybody get more of your framework? Because you're actually out teaching and coaching this as well, correct? For the family framework.
I do work with legacy families, and we do have coaches that work with families, and then there's online programming to help you with this. And it's really implementable and really affordable, and we've just seen amazing results with the framework. My website is just Rich Christiansen. That's spelled, let's see, I'll even pop up. Yeah, it looks like it is shut down, but Rich Christiansen, CHRISTIANSEN.com. And you can get my books anywhere. I would encourage you, if you listen to Blindsided, I read it, and people seem to like that the best. So probably want Audible Blindsided if that's the route you go.
That's great. Well, it's been an honor to have you on the show. It's been fun to listen to the story, the framework, even the challenge that became such a great 5-year work of art. And I'm grateful for learning and listening to you today. So thanks for joining me today, Rich.
Thank you, Scott. A delight to visit with you, and I just really appreciated being on your program.
I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you liked it, there's more where this one came from. Click here and enjoy some more.